It all started with a message. A simple one, almost insignificant. One of those that get lost among hundreds on a dating app. Laura had installed the app less than a week ago. Her breakup with Daniel still hurt, but the loneliness weighed more heavily. One night of insomnia and cheap wine led her to swipe absent-mindedly through her phone screen, not expecting much. Then he appeared. His name, Matteo. A black and white photo, a shy smile, dark eyes that seemed to see beyond the lens. They didn't talk much at first. Short, polite replies. But something in the tone of his answers, between the lines, felt intriguing. He wasn't like the others. He didn't send cheap compliments or forced emojis. He asked real things. Deep things. As the days passed, their conversations became long, nightly, intense. Laura felt like she had known him before, even though she hadn't even heard his voice. Matteo said things she thought about, things she had never told anyone. Details from her childhood, her fears, her broken dreams. It was as if he could read her mind. What at first seemed romantic slowly began to unsettle her. How did he know she had gotten lost in the forest behind her house when she was 5? Why did he mention the birthmark on her hip, the one that never showed up in photos? One night, after a long conversation about fate and death, Matteo sent her a link. "Listen to this, it's how I feel when we talk," he wrote. It was an instrumental piece, melancholic, with a hypnotic rhythm that gave her goosebumps. The next morning she woke up with Matteo's name echoing in her thoughts. She decided to search for him on other social media platforms, but found nothing. No Facebook, no Instagram. He only existed on that app. Not even a recent picture, no detailed bio. Just that same black and white image. And yet he knew everything about her. Laura began having strange dreams. Always the same forest, always the same voice whispering her name. Matteo told her that he dreamed of her too. That in his dreams he saw her walking barefoot among the trees, searching for something. "You're close to finding it," he said one night. "You just need to trust." That was when he suggested meeting in person. Just a simple coffee in a public place, no pressure, he assured. Laura hesitated. Something inside her screamed no. But she also felt an odd pull, like an invisible force pushing her toward that meeting. What if he really was different? What if, in the middle of the emotional chaos she was in, this mysterious man was her only real connection? He said yes. But before she could continue, why did Laura find an old photo in her basement with a face identical to Matteo's, years before meeting him? Laura went down to the basement that morning, driven by a strange impulse. She was looking for a box of old books, trying to distract herself from the anxiety that the upcoming meeting with Matteo was stirring in her. The place smelled of damp and old wood. Among the dust-covered objects she found a childhood photo album, the kind with sticky plastic pages. She flipped through it absent-mindedly, until she stopped abruptly. There was a black and white photo, faded, probably from the 1980s. In the corner, among a group of smiling children, there he was. The same face. The same gaze. The same shy smile as Matteo. But it was impossible. That image looked at least 30 years old. How could it be him? Laura went upstairs with the album in her hands, her heart pounding. She scanned the photo, zoomed in on the face. Compared it to the dating app profile. There was no doubt. It was him. She thought of confronting him but changed her mind. She decided to wait for the meeting. Maybe there was a logical explanation. Maybe it was just an absurd coincidence or someone who looked a lot like him. But a part of her, the part she usually ignored, knew that this was a sign. A warning. So she went. The meeting was set for 6 in the evening at an old cafe downtown. A discreet place with big windows and soft instrumental music in the background. Laura arrived early. She ordered a tea. Her hands were shaking. She looked toward the door with every sound of the bell. When he finally walked in, the world seemed to slow down. Matteo looked exactly like in the photo, only more intense. His eyes seemed to go through layers. He smiled, approached and kissed her hand, like someone from another time. They talked for hours. About everything and nothing. He knew her sister's name, the street where she grew up, the date her dog died. But he spoke softly as if his words were made of silk. Laura wavered between enchantment and terror. When she dared to ask how he knew so much, Matteo just smiled. "The connection between us is older than you think," he answered. "Some souls find each other again even if the body changes." She laughed nervously. You talk like you're immortal. He looked straight at her. Maybe I am. The silence that followed seemed to last hours. Then he stood, paid the bill, and said casually, "Let's walk. I need to show you something." She hesitated. But something inside her, an ancient, muffled voice, told her to say yes. They walked through the old streets of the city until they reached an empty park. The sky was gray, the air damp. Matteo stopped in front of a wooden bench. He pointed to the ground. There was a symbol drawn in white chalk. A circle with incomprehensible letters. Laura stepped back. "What is this?" she asked. He didn't answer. He just looked at her with an expression that mixed sadness and hope. "This is where it all began," he murmured. "And this is where it can end. If you want." But before she could reply, the sound of hurried footsteps interrupted the moment. Someone was watching them from the darkness among the trees. Someone who didn't want that reunion to happen. The footsteps were rushed, almost dragging, echoing among the dry leaves of the silent park. Laura turned abruptly, trying to see into the darkness between the trees. Matteo remained still, eyes fixed on the void as if he already knew who was there. She whispered his name, expecting an explanation, but he didn't respond. Instead, he slowly walked to the edge of the circle drawn on the ground and stopped. The figure that emerged from the shadows was a woman. Tall, wearing a dark coat, her face partially covered by a thick scarf. Her eyes were sunken, marked by sleepless nights and memories that seemed to weigh a lifetime. Laura didn't recognize her. But the woman recognized Laura. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice firm, almost hoarse. Matteo stepped forward as if to shield her. "She has the right to know," he said. "She's already felt it. She's already dreamed it." The woman looked at Laura with pity. "He's leading you to the same place others never came back from. You think you just met him, but he's existed far longer than you imagine." Laura felt a deep chill, as if someone had run ice down her spine. "Who are you?" she asked, unable to hide her fear. "I'm someone who once believed in him too. Many years ago." Matteo interrupted. "She doesn't understand. She's not like you." The woman stepped closer to Laura, removed the scarf from her face, revealing a scar running from the corner of her eye to her jaw. "You think he only appeared for you? That this encounter is unique? He does this to all of them. Every single one. Always the same story, the same eyes, the same promise. But none of them understood the truth in time." Laura stepped back. Her heart was beating so hard she could barely breathe. She looked at Matteo, who now seemed paler, almost translucent under the dim light of the nearest lamp. "Is what she's saying true?" she asked, her voice trembling. Matteo smiled, but this time without tenderness. There was melancholy. "Not everything that's true can be explained. Some things must be felt. And you did feel it, Laura. In the basement. When you saw the photo. When you dreamed of me in the woods. When you whispered my name before waking." She began to recall the dreams, the recurring images, the sensation of having known him before. It was as if he had always been there, lurking at the edge of her life, waiting for the moment to reveal himself. "Are you real?" she asked. Matteo didn't answer. The woman, now beside her, grabbed Lara's arm. "You can still leave. You can still break the cycle. But you have to come with me. Now." A heavy silence settled between the three. The wind picked up, carrying dry leaves and the echo of something yet to be revealed. Laura was torn. In front of her, the promise of something inexplicable. At her side, the chance to escape. But escape from what, exactly? That's when Matteo whispered, "If you go with her, you'll never know the truth. And the truth is all that's left." Laura felt the weight of the decision like a stone lodged in her chest. On one side, the woman marked by pain, offering a way out that seemed reasonable. On the other, Matteo, enigmatic, hypnotic like an abyss. His eyes seemed to plead, but not with desperation. It was the look of someone who knows that, in the end, she'll choose him. "It's not a trap, Laura," he said softly, almost like a chant. "It's a reunion. You know that. Deep down, you know it." The woman gripped her hand tightly. "If you stay, he'll show you what he is, but at the cost of everything you know is real. You'll cross a threshold you can't return from. I crossed it. And now, all that's left is what you see." Those words echoed deeply. But something in Laura held her still. Slowly, she released the woman's hand, her eyes full of doubt. "Just tell me who you are. Tell me the truth." The woman hesitated. Then with a look of resignation she said, "My name was Clara. 27 years ago I was like you. I thought I was special too." Her eyes welled with tears. "Matteo, or whatever name he goes by now, came into my life just like with you. Same dreams. Same symbols. I followed him. I thought I'd found the answers. But what I found was a void that still consumes me." Matteo turned his face away as if that chapter was one he didn't wish to revisit. "She only saw part of the story. She ran before understanding," he murmured. "And she spent all these years wandering between fear and memory." Laura closed her eyes for a moment. Everything was spinning. Voices, images, fragments of dreams. Matteo's presence grew stronger, almost physical. She felt warmth rising from the ground, running through her. When she opened her eyes, the circle on the ground was glowing softly. Something had been activated. The woman stepped back, alarmed. "He's doing it again. He's opening the portal. If you cross that line, Laura, you won't be able to return." But instead of fleeing, Laura knelt by the circle, fascinated by the symbols. Something inside her recognized them, as if she had been there before, as if all this were just a repetition. Matteo stepped closer and held out his hand. "Come with me. You're not crazy. You're waking up." The woman shouted, "Don't do it." But in that moment, Lara's eyes shone. And she whispered like someone remembering something forgotten, I have been here before." And then, without thinking, she stepped into the circle. The world froze for a second. The park darkened. All sound vanished. The air turned dense. The ground beneath her trembled lightly. And Matteo, for the first time, smiled with a joy that bordered on madness. But what lay on the other side of the circle was only beginning to reveal itself. The air inside the circle was different. Thicker. Older. As soon as Laura stepped in, she felt time stretching, like she was moving underwater. Matteo entered after her effortlessly, as if the space belonged to him. The outside world, the park, the trees, the woman shouting her name, blurred, dissolving into a thick mist. Everything around them began to shift. They were no longer in the park. They were somewhere else. The ground beneath her feet was black as ash. Twisted trees loomed in the distance, stretching toward a starless sky. A cold wind blew aimlessly, and in the air whispers floated, soft voices in a language she didn't know but somehow understood. Laura turned to Matteo. He looked at her tenderly, like he had been waiting for this moment for centuries. "This is the real place where we meet," he said. "What you saw before was just a reflection." Laura tried to speak, but her throat was dry. She could only nod, stunned. Despite the fear, she felt a strange peace. As if, in some way, she had come home. They walked through the shadows for a time she couldn't measure. There were no clocks here. No logic. With every step, memories that weren't hers flashed through her mind. A woman dancing under the moon in the Middle Ages, a child locked in a basement, a young girl burned in a public square. All of them had the same eyes. The same eyes she now had. Matteo finally stopped in front of a stone structure, resembling an ancient chapel. Huge dark wooden doors were covered in carved symbols. He looked at her and said, "Here you'll understand everything. But once you cross this threshold, you won't be who you were." Laura, without saying a word, placed her hand on the door. At her touch, an energy ran through her body, a mix of heat and electricity. The doors opened with a long groan, and inside was a room lit only by blue candles, casting no shadow. At the center, a circle like the one from the park. But this one wasn't made of chalk. It was made of dried blood. Matteo stepped behind her and whispered, "Each of you reaches this point. Some run. Some die. Others transcend." Laura felt something begin to emerge from deep inside her. An ancient power, wild, repressed for generations. Her vision began to darken at the edges. The world trembled around her. Voices screamed from the walls. Forgotten names. Broken pacts. Wept offerings. And then a figure emerged from the back of the room. A familiar face. Her own. But different. Hollow-eyed. And that other Laura began to walk toward her, holding a knife. Laura instinctively stepped back, never taking her eyes off the figure that bore her face. The atmosphere grew even denser, as if the air had turned to liquid. Every step the other version of herself took echoed with an impossible resonance, like footsteps inside her own mind. The knife glimmered with a dull light as though it had been forged from shadow. Matteo didn't move. He watched the scene with a disturbing calm, as if everything was happening just as it should. "That's you, or what you could have become," he murmured. "She's the part of you that refuses to remember. The one that keeps you tied to the old world." Laura swallowed hard. Her heart was pounding so fiercely it felt like it would break through her chest. The other Laura kept advancing, eyes fixed and lifeless. But there was something in her expression, not rage, not hatred. It was pain. Deep, ancient pain. What is this?" Laura asked in a whisper. Matteo took a step toward her. "This place is a threshold. Between who you were and who you are meant to be. Everyone who comes here faces the same thing. The mirror. The shadow. The blood." The figure raised the knife. She didn't run. She didn't scream. She simply approached as if she knew the ending was inevitable. Laura felt pressure in her chest, as if an invisible weight were pushing her to the ground. But then an idea crossed her mind. Something Matteo had said before. Some transcend. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and instead of running, she walked toward her other self, step by step. With fear, yes, but also with a growing strength that came from somewhere deeper than logic. When they stood face to face, the figure raised the knife. Laura didn't flinch. "If you're me, you don't need to kill me," she whispered. In that instant the figure froze. The knife trembled. The lifeless eyes blinked for the first time. And from them black tears began to fall. Slowly the figure faded, like ash scattered into the air. The knife clattered to the floor with a hollow echo. Matteo nodded, satisfied. "You accepted it. Not everyone can." The blood circle on the ground began to glow. Not with light, but with an absence so profound it hurt to look at. Laura shivered. The place recognized her. It was claiming her. "Now you can go forward," Matteo said, offering his hand. "The next threshold is the hardest. What's coming is the origin." Before she could respond, the walls of the room began to creak, and a hidden door slowly opened at the back of the temple. Behind it, a narrow passage led downward into darkness. From within something could be heard. Footsteps. Footsteps coming toward her. But this time they weren't her own. The footsteps were heavy, uneven, like someone dragging not only their feet but centuries of damnation. Laura stood still before the open door. The descending corridor exhaled cold, damp air that smelled of wet stone, of confinement, of earth sealed by time. Matteo remained silent, but his eyes now shone with an intensity she had never seen before. He was no longer just the guide. There was something more behind his gaze now, something that resembled pride. "What you'll hear next isn't in any book," he said in a deep voice. "This is what was erased, silenced, burned. Here there are no symbols. Here only the naked truth remains." Laura swallowed hard and stepped onto the first stair. Each step seemed to change the temperature around her. The blue candlelight faded one by one as she descended. Matteo did not follow. He simply watched from above like a guardian of the threshold. "You have to go alone," he said before the darkness swallowed her completely. The hallway was longer than it looked. The walls narrowed as she went down until she had to lean forward. Finally, she reached an underground chamber. In the center was a well. Not wide but deep. All around it, names were carved in different languages and alphabets. Some recognizable, others impossible to decipher. Laura approached. Inside the well there was no water. Only darkness. But from that darkness came a voice. It didn't speak. It didn't whisper. It was a voice that didn't use words. It was as if a dormant part of her mind had begun to wake. A voice she knew even though she had never heard it before. Then she saw it. A face appeared, floating in the well's shadows. It wasn't Matteo. It wasn't her. It was something else. A mix of all the faces she had dreamed. A fusion of lives, times, destinies. The face opened its eyes. Eyes like abysses. And when it spoke, it did so from inside her mind. "You were the first." Laura collapsed to her knees. "You made the first pact. You broke the cycle. You sealed it with blood. And now, you have returned." The words cut into her consciousness like blades. Images began to flash through her mind like pieces of a forgotten film. A ceremony in a forest centuries ago, a mark burned into her skin, a vow whispered under the full moon. He was the cause. He was the root. And then she understood. Matteo hadn't chosen her. She had summoned him. Long before this life. Long before her name was Laura. And just as she tried to process that truth, a second figure rose from the well's darkness. A faceless figure. One that extended its arms toward her. And that figure also spoke. Are you ready to become who you were again? The faceless being didn't touch Laura, but its presence was so tangible it felt like it surrounded her, passed through her, merged with every cell of her body. It had no mouth, yet its voice resonated from within, as if it were speaking from the very core of her soul. You crossed the veil. Now the veil will cross into you. Laura took a step back. Her mind struggled to make sense of what was happening. She no longer knew how much time had passed since she entered the temple. Minutes? Hours? Days? Time didn't follow normal rules here. But what disturbed her most was the growing certainty that none of this was new. Everything felt familiar. As if this had been her destiny long before she was born. The faceless figure extended a hand. In its palm was an object. An ancient ring, dark metal, with a stone in the center that seemed to contain a swirling shadow. This ring is your seal, said the figure. With it you open the door, and with it you can close it. But not without paying the price. Laura slowly raised her hand and took the ring. The moment her fingers touched it, a wave of memories crashed through her like an avalanche. She saw her face reflected in mirrors from long-forgotten centuries. She saw her hands holding forbidden books. She saw fire. So much fire. A crowd shouting. And she saw Matteo. Always Matteo. With different names. With different faces. But the same eyes. Sometimes her ally. Sometimes her executioner. The ring burned her skin, but she didn't let go. On the contrary, she slipped it onto her finger. As she did, the stone seemed to pulse like a heart. The well vibrated. The ground shook. And from its depths, an ancient sound emerged. A chant lost to the centuries. In that moment, the faceless figure began to fade. You have remembered, it said. Now choose. A door opened at the far end of the chamber. It was made of dark wood, marked with the same symbol as the ring. When she crossed it, Laura felt the weight of the place grow lighter. On the other side, there was no darkness. There was light. Not the warm light of the sun, but a white, raw, absolute light. And there was Matteo waiting for her. Only this time, he wasn't the gentle man from the cafe, nor the silent guide from the temple. His face revealed what he truly was. A being beyond time with scars in his soul and a gaze that held 1,000 lives. Now you know everything, he said. You know what you did. And you know what you can do. Laura looked down. The ring burned like cold fire on her hand. The cycle can end here, Matteo added. But for that, one of us cannot walk out. Another silence fell between them. One that needed no explanation. Because in the end that was the story. Two souls bound by a pact. But only one would come out alive. The silence between them was so dense it felt like time itself was holding its breath. Matteo stared at her without hate, without fear, without love. It was a neutral look, of someone who had seen this moment repeat over and over. Laura felt the weight of the ring on her finger as if she were carrying a sentence. It wasn't just an object, it was a key, a memory, a debt. They took a few steps, slowly, approaching the center of that white space where there was no ceiling, no shadows, no escape. Laura felt that every step erased a piece of her former identity. She was no longer the confused girl who had signed up for a dating app. No longer the woman who had gone into her basement by accident. He was something more. Matteo spoke in a low, almost paternal voice. You know, I'm not your enemy. I am only what you decided I would be. Laura looked into his eyes. Then what am I? You are the first flame. The initiator. The echo of a promise made before language existed. But also, you are the only one who can close the circle. The floor beneath their feet began to shift. Geometric shapes emerged, slowly rotating around them. Ancient symbols floated in the air. Everything pointed to the final moment approaching. Matteo stretched out his hand. In his palm was another ring. Identical to hers. We are reflections. You remember, I do too. If you choose, I disappear, or remain. Laura felt a knot in her stomach. The images she had seen, the fragments of past lives, the connection between them. Should it really end like this? Did she have to break the cycle by killing someone who had, in truth, always been a part of her? You could leave, he said gently. You could wake up tomorrow in your bed. Forget everything. The world would go on. But you know that if you do, others will go through the same. The ring on her finger burned stronger. Matteo's ring began to glow with a dark light. Between them an invisible line formed, like a thread of energy, of shared history, of inherited pain. And then Matteo stepped back. I can't decide for you. I can only accept. It's always been your choice. Behind her a new door formed. An exit. A promise to forget. To run. But maybe also, to condemn someone else. Laura felt tears fall. Not from fear. Not from sorrow. But from the weight of understanding. It all came down to this, choosing. She raised the hand with the ring, ready to make an irreversible decision. Matteo whispered something only she could understand. Something that had been spoken in that forest centuries ago, during the first night their souls had intertwined. But just before she could respond, the white light began to flicker violently. Something was entering the room. Something that was neither of them. Something that should never have awakened. The light flickered once more and then went out. Everything was plunged into dimness. A cold wind swept through the room, followed by a deep, guttural sound, as if the earth itself were groaning. Laura felt her body shiver. Not from fear, but from the absolute certainty that what was entering the space wasn't a creature. It was a force. A consciousness older than silence itself. And that presence recognized her. Matteo took a step back, and for the first time his expression changed. There was no calm or resignation now. There was fear. The entity, it awakened too early, he muttered. That only happens when the decision takes too long. Laura then understood what he feared. The cycle wasn't just between the two of them. There was something else watching from the shadows of history. Something that fed on the eternal loop of pact, love, betrayal, and sacrifice. Something that didn't want the cycle to end, because breaking it meant its death. The entity emerged like a shadow unfolding from all directions at once. It had no clear form. No face. It was the accumulation of every version of Laura that had failed. The ones who fled. The ones who died. The ones who sealed their fate unknowingly. And now it was coming for her. Matteo looked at her, desperate. You have to do it. No. While you still have control. Use the ring. Choose. Laura clenched her fist. She looked at her ring. Then at Matteo's. And for an instant time seemed to stop. She saw in her mind all the Laras who had reached this point. All carrying the same question. All believing they were alone. But this time something was different. She wasn't going to repeat the cycle. She raised the hand with the ring. The entity let out a scream with no mouth. Matteo closed his eyes, bracing for the final blow. But Laura didn't point at him. She pointed at herself. I can't eliminate you without destroying the root, she said firmly. And the root is me. The ring on her finger glowed with a blinding red light. Energy surged out of her like a silent explosion. Everything shook. The temple, the well, the doors. The entity howled in an impossible language. Matteo fell to his knees. And Laura vanished. She didn't die. She dissolved. As if her soul had returned to the 0 point, where it had all begun. And with her disappearance, everything else collapsed. The entity was pulled into the void, consumed. Matteo screamed her name one last time before the room was engulfed in complete darkness. Days later, in a small town on the other side of the world, a young woman downloaded a dating app. She created a profile, uploaded a picture, began to swipe. And among the first profiles that appeared was him. With the same smile. And the same eyes. But this time something was different. In the reflection of his pupils, there was a ring. And the story might be about to begin again. Or maybe not. It depends on who sees it. And whether they'll know how to choose.